I would like to start by thanking my old friend Dr. Ulrike Müller for planting the idea for this talk in the symposium several years ago in the before times, and also the other co-organizers of the symposium for sticking with me through a difficult 2020. The talk I'm about to give today is very different from what I had in mind back then, but I hope that it's actually more relevant to the kind of context in which we are all finding our way through approaches to teaching right now. My talk is focused on how a natural disaster like a hurricane impacts student learning. My name is Madhusudan Katti, and among my co-authors are three students whose names are underlined here. We are part of a large team, so four co-PIs, faculty, including a librarian in Darby, Orcutt, a couple of graduate students, and 50 undergraduate students, all funded by the National Science Foundation through a rapid grant in the wake of Hurricane Florence in 2018. If you think about hurricanes, you might, easily remember that we've just lived through a record year for hurricanes. So much so that in 2020, we ran out of the alphabet for naming tropical storm systems in the Atlantic, running past the English alphabet into the Greek and all the way up to iota, leaving us with 31 named storms, a number of which turned into hurricanes that devastated different parts of the US, especially in the Gulf Coast. North Carolina was spared this time, but in the last few years, it's been in the path of three different hurricanes that have had significant impact. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew caused significant damage across the state. I remember our campus being closed for over a week because of trees down all over the place and power lines down. In 2018, Hurricane Florence, which is the subject of our study, came through and inflicted a fair amount of damage on the eastern part of the state. And that was followed by Hurricane Michael in October of 2018, which had spent most of its energy on battering Florida, but still had enough moisture in it that it dumped a bunch of water all over the eastern part of the state. So you had the wind and flooding and rain damage from Hurricane Florence compounded by further rain and flooding by Michael. And the focus of our study was to try and understand how these things impacted, especially the tree cover forest structure and the damage that can cause to structures and infrastructure. So if you think about Hurricane Florence, it made landfall just south of Wrightsville Beach on September 14th and took 4 days to traverse across the Carolinas. It weakened as it went further inland, but it dumped so much rain that over 2,200 primary and secondary roads were closed for significant amounts of time due to substantial flooding and other kinds of damage. This included the I-95 corridor, which is the main interstate corridor across the East Coast, significant sections of which were closed because they had essentially turned into a river. There were record-setting rain in Elizabethtown and in the Wilmington area. So this was a very wet event. In this context, we started our study by asking how a disaster like this occurring in the middle of a semester might impact students' learning and resilience, especially with students who might come from areas where they've been impacted by hurricanes. And then we also set out to design a different kind of learning experience outside the classroom, which centers on the students' home communities and potentially helps them remain engaged in science learning while also doing something about the hurricane in their own community. The ecologist in me also wanted to find out if we can measure the impact of the hurricane through this student-based learning experience using 360-degree photography. And we also had students conducting oral history interviews to document how the community was experiencing the hurricane and what their longer term experiences were like. In terms of student impacts, the study really was motivated when I first found out that some 4,797 students from our campus had their home addresses in counties that were federally disaster declared in eastern North Carolina after Hurricane Florence. So essentially, 1 in 7 students enrolled at NC State in the fall of 2018 had some direct experience or connection with the hurricane's impact. From these, we selected 50 students because that's what our budget, NSF budget allowed. We selected 50 students after conducting a survey that was sent out to all 4,797 students. Our response rate was low, but we got around 150 responses, and we selected 50 students, over half of whom were female. Nearly 60% were STEM majors, but a significant number were non-STEM majors, and we had a fair diversity, representative of the diversity in the state. And we gave each student a stipend of $1,000 for participation in this project and conducting the field surveys. And the field survey design itself was a co-creation in partnership with the students. And by that, I mean, what we did was, as you can see in the image, this is a workshop where we gave students training on what was to be done, but then we also sat down with the students to draw on their experience and their knowledge of the local community to identify locations where the photographic surveys and the oral histories were to be conducted. So we teamed up students into teams of 2, and each pair then identified 10 locations that they knew had some damage involving a tree falling down or branches falling on a house or something like that. And once that was done, we then added 10 additional sort of random control sites and so each team then went out and surveyed 20 locations. This is a map showing the distribution of the surveyed locations. It's representative of where our students came from and also captures the more severely hit parts of eastern North Carolina. Just quickly passing over this ecological results because I want to focus more on the student learning outcomes here. But we use 360-degree photography. Students had a 360-degree camera, which they used to take pictures of the habitat at each location. And we were then able to use 3D VR sort of headsets, Oculus headsets, to assess the damage. And we found out that a number of sites actually did not show a lot of damage. Part of it is because we conducted a survey 8 months after the damage, after the hurricane had actually passed through. And the reason for that delay was that our grant proposal was caught up in the government shutdown that occurred at the end of 2018 and early 2019. So by the time we got the funding to start the project to recruit students, we had to schedule our field work for the students in May of 2019. So it was 8 months after the hurricane itself had hit. Yet there were sites where there's a significant number of sites with moderate, light, or even severe impact still visible. I think if this method can be really useful if we are to really deploy it rapidly right after a hurricane, and we might be able to capture more of the damage. Students interviewed a whole range of people and collected some very interesting stories, and I have a couple of samples for you. This is from John M.
Carolina Beach and Curry Beach that you've got probably now a majority of people who've never lived in the South, who've never gone through hurricanes, who are not native to this area and expect hurricanes, that you have a major problem with them trying to figure out what's a hurricane. It's just a big rainstorm with a little gusty wind. For someone like myself who grew up in Florida, who lived in South Carolina, who lived in North Carolina, hurricanes are a way of life. Yeah. You don't get away from it. In September, historically speaking, between the 15th and the 25th of September historically is when we get hit. That's how New Inlet was created. 1761 was a slow moving hurricane that came through in somewhere around the 20th of September, and it sat off the coast and created a cut at the haulover spot between the Atlantic Ocean and Cape Fear River. So the whole reason we're here.
Do you feel that you would need to do something differently to prepare if another hurricane were coming?
Well, we got rid of the big trees.
Yeah, that was
yeah, we had a big tree in the bathroom that we said, okay, let that one get out of here too.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you guys would like to add?
The only thing that I want to add is I'm not looking forward to September 14th.
What's coming September 14th?
2 years in a row, September 14th. The last storm was September 14th.
Oh.
The year before, we had a water thing in the kitchen under the sink. Had to rip the floor out, take the cabins out. We had to live outside on a little cooker for 6 weeks.
Wow. I'm sorry you guys had to do that.
September the 14th.
Wow.
In terms of student outcomes, we measured a number of different aspects of student learning, the impact on STEM identity, on resilience, and on science interest and enjoyment. And I can get into details of methodology if people are interested, but I want to just share the results. We found that participants expressed a higher degree of STEM identity 2 months after the fieldwork was done than in the pre-test. In terms of resilience, we found interesting results with male students showing a significant and fairly substantial jump in their perseverance and help-seeking scores, whereas female students didn't change all that much. And of course, students also reported a higher degree of science interest and enjoyment on days when their data collection experiences were more positive, which is not really surprising. So what are our insights into post-disaster student learning? Informal learning experiences can promote science identity in hurricane impacted students. Outdoor informal science learning can also foster resilience, but these effects might vary depending on gender and potentially ethnicity as well. So for example, we don't know if team dynamics were different for men and women, resulting in the different scores, or maybe the stereotypes around STEM for females impact their resilience scores, or it could also be that females students would come from an upbringing where they're more likely to seek help, which is one of our measures, and therefore score better on resilience, whereas male students were raised more individualistically and therefore were less resilient. Students' interest and enjoyment fluctuated daily and depended on how the day went in the field. And overall, we think we have a good model here for the potential type of intervention that you might design to promote STEM identity and resilience in students in the wake of disasters, and to keep students engaged in learning in a way that improves their engagement with their own community. If you want to learn more, students have created a story map that you can access at that URL. And if you scan that QR code, you can get to our website and learn more about the project. Thank you.